Do you want to preface this episode? Do you want to be included in the intro to tell people what just happened?
I would love to. Bekki and I were set to record this morning a different topic, which we will go over later at some point. And then in my hour-long ranting to her before we recorded about the state of retail, how I feel about my own career, how I feel about like where we are and what we find acceptable, Bekki did what she does best and pivoted last minute so that we could record this all for you. So enjoy this impromptu recording.
Yeah, this very winding, unstructured, but honestly, I think just what came to mind is like you've talked about how much you enjoy your day to day and how there are a lot of things that you really enjoy about where you are, and I'm just so curious to know. And I know other people have told me this too. It's like, it's fine. I've been there for a long time. I know how to play the game. But now what? And I'm really curious to know what the source of their curiosity and their wandering eye or heart is, and also what companies can do, if anything, to notice and make some difference in making them happier and keeping them longer. I don't know if we got there, but it was fun talking.
Yes, it was. I do not arbitrarily seek novelty. I'm pretty planful and mindful in how I do things. I have been with my husband for 18 years. My best friend and I have been inseparable since high school, 23 years ago. I'm not saying that as like a weird brag. I'm saying that because I do think that when people look at my resume, and I've heard this directly from a regional, a DM here and there, almost that I have a loyalty problem, or like, I just want something new, different problem. And I'm using those two relationships to just back up this idea, because it's like, well, that's not true. Like, as a human, that is not true about me. But again, those relationships have like evolved and changed, and there's differences, and there's communication, and there's openness. That is what I'm looking for in a business relationship, in a relationship with a brand. I want to be able to have those open lines, and if I want something different or a new set of problems, be able to communicate that. And maybe it's a store transfer, maybe it's mentoring, maybe it's something else, and those options aren't always available to you.
There's no shortage of episodes that we have that touch on turnover or are directly about turnover. And I think we've touched on different reasons why people go. I want to talk about when there's no real reason. What's happening when things are kind of fine, status quo, but it feels like it's time for a change? And think about when you were restless. Why couldn't you move up in that company? Because I know you are a high-performing store manager. So were people not seeing your potential? Was there just not a position available? What do you think is going on?
Wow. Well, first, let me address the restless thing. I think that part of the issue there, and I've, as a leader who's had very low turnover for the most part in most companies I've had, it's because I've allowed people to have very, very honest conversations with me about their restlessness. Like, what is making you restless? Like, because this is where I turn into the Bekki of my store. Like, I'm a naturally curious person. I want to know, like, there's been an energy shift with someone, and I'm like, what's happening? And a lot of times depending on the person and how well they know me, I have to convince them that it's safe to share what they really want to share. Because they're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm just, and then they like trail off, and you're like, no, like, let's get to it. What is happening? And then you find out that they're bored, or they feel like they have no purpose, or it's just not doing it for them anymore. Like, maybe they're in visual merchandising and they're doing it and they're like, it just all feels the same. It feels repetitive. I want to do something else, or I want to learn something else. So through those conversations, I've been able to like pivot pretty quickly. And, one of my uh, previous employees at Old Navy who is now a friend, Pam, and she listens to this. Shout out, Pam. Uh, Pam wanted to do a new thing every day. I mean, practically. It was like, I mean, not every day, but she's the definition of someone who's like consistently restless. You give her a project, she tackles it, she gets it to the best of her ability, maybe even better than most other people. And then immediately, like the next day, she's like, I'm bored. What do you got for me? And then I have to pivot with her constantly. And so part of retaining her is just going on that winding road. And for myself, I feel like it's very different when you're a store manager and more difficult to one, be that transparent with your DM, but also for the DM to give you actual things of value to do, because sometimes it's looked at like, but you have a store to run. Like, what do you mean you don't have enough to do? And for me personally, it's like, I mean, anyone could go back to any of our podcast episodes and be like, you talk about how there's too much to do, and now you're saying you want more to do. So what gives? And it's like, yeah, but do I have a lot to do organically? Because, and I've said this before, because that's what the business necessitates, or are you just throwing a lot at me so I have a lot to do, but half of it is like not necessary, or for lack of a better word, busy work that doesn't have to exist. So I think that's a big piece of the restlessness for store managers. And you see store managers who are in companies for 6 months or 8 months or a year or less. And, there's a lot of conversation about loyalty and whatever. Loyalty is BS, first of all. That's first and foremost. Like, what are we getting for this loyalty? Besides the fact that on my resume, it looks like I can put up with a lot of BS for many years. So that's first and foremost. And second of all, there's so many micro decisions that happen that wear away at you as a store leader over time. And for me personally, I'll just be really transparent and say, for a long time, I thought, okay, I need to build up my resilience to shenanigans. And some of that's true, and I have over time, but it's also like I'm realizing that there's a direct correlation between tolerance for shenanigans and me just going through the motions. So in order for me to tolerate a lot of shenanigans, I have to also, at some level, kind of not care about the outcomes. Because the care button is directly related to how much decisions of a company piss me off. Because if I care a lot and you make a lot of bad decisions, well, now I'm upset. Now I have questions. I have concerns. I want to fix it. I want to help. I want to do something. So it's like if I bring that all down and I'm like, okay, just it is what it is. Calm, cool, collected. Well, that also takes down the like, okay, well, I just don't care. Well, do whatever you want. And eventually that leads to, well, now I got to go. Because now I've pulled my care so far down because you've beaten it out of me. Now what? And then to your second part of that question, I think there are leaders that have, this is like you've put me in a hard place to answer this question because there's no way to answer it without sounding like disgruntled that I'm not like a DM or a higher level position. And I'm actually not in a lot of ways. I think there have been leaders that have seen potential in me or thought that I could do those things. I also think though that every level you move up in retail and probably a lot of other like professional roles requires you to remove a piece of your personality that it's probably clear to those who've managed me I'm never going to let go of. Because as people move up, they become a little bit more robotic, a little bit more tailored to fit. And no one could ever claim about me that I'm tailored to fit anything. And so I think there's automatically like a recognition of like, ooh, that person would be like would be like a loose cannon or would ruffle feathers. And that's probably true in some ways. And I don't think that anyone looks for people who are going to ruffle feathers. They look for status quo keepers.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not a status quo keeper. I mean, maybe that's just what I tell myself to sleep at night. I don't know. But I do think that there's some truth to that for sure.
I have so many follow-up questions because there's so many things that I think can present maybe similarly to when somebody, you can probably tell when you think someone is off, when their energy shifts, maybe they're thinking about leaving.
Hmm.
And we talked about you talked about maybe being bored, and what ultimately I heard in you describing it was like maybe it's not so much bored because you have there's no shortage of things to do, tasks, but maybe you're unfulfilled. Like that's what I heard. And then you even talked about, being maybe you're like being tired of something or burned out, but maybe you're not tired. Maybe it's like a powerlessness that's forcing your care lever down. And you talk like conformity and fit, like all of these things I feel like are just really interesting, nuanced ways to think about why someone who is maybe killing it in the company might be leaving. And I think it's important to understand those nuances before you try and solve your turnover problem. And to that point, my next question is you said sometimes it's really difficult to be transparent with your DM. Why?
This is where it gets more personal and less, I can put a single answer on something. But for me, part of this is probably that I just, in general, feel the need to preface a lot of things, like feelings or thoughts, to like soften the edges.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that when you are speaking to a DM and you want to be transparent and you want to critique something, you almost are expected to do the prefacing of like, well, I'm not going to leave. Or like, I love working here. I love what we do. I love what I do. But like you can't just go into it and say, this is bullshit. Because then it brings up a question of, is this store leader right for the role? Uh, do they even like working here? I think there's a certain level of critique that you can provide, or not even critique, sometimes just neutral observations of what you've seen that make people question your commitment. And so you're stuck being like, do I voice the thing or do I swallow the thing? If I swallow the thing, I'll be rewarded for being a team player or for just, I've actually had leaders when I'm swallowing all the things, and it's funny, that just reinforces the behavior, right? Where they go, thanks so much for just, doing it. Like a stupid task or something that like no one really agrees with. And if I get to a certain point in the company, I will just swallow it all and just do it. And I won't question it. You're getting no comments from the peanut gallery. And I've had leaders say, thanks for just doing it. Like, I know that no one wants to do it. Or, I've heard a bunch of leaders say, yada, yada. And I'm like, oh, yeah, no problem. Realize, though, for those listening, if you're managing anyone who's similar to me, that's probably like 3 steps before I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Like, that's me already being like, yeah, no problem. Yeah, when I say yeah, no problem, I mean it. I'm not lying to you. It just means I'm already disengaged somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's funny. I have an employee right now who he's similar to me in a lot of ways and gives me a lot of, I'll say, grief about certain things. And it's funny because he said to me one day, thank you for not thinking I hate working here. Like, not thinking that I
Mm-hmm.
hate working here. And I was like, oh, I don't think you hate working here. And he goes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've had a lot of leaders think I hate it because I am always saying something or unhappy with something or whatever. And he's just looking around and thinking, well, this doesn't make sense. Let's talk about it. And I'm the type of person like, yeah, let's talk about it. We might not get anywhere. It might not even be something I can change, but let's discuss. Let me hear you. It's actually through hearing him complain that I'm like, complain, that I'm more aware of like, oh, this is kind of the second he stops being like that and starts being just compliant on command is the day that I know he's going to leave soon.
Right.
That's how I will know personally. I'll be like, ooh, he's gonna go. Okay, interesting. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think sometimes for DMs or for maybe store managers, it's like, well, do I bring this up to the DM because they don't really have control over it? So like, then I'm just like bringing an issue that they can't control. So it's like neither of us will be happy. I might as well just swallow it and move on because it's only a temporary fix when your DM agrees with you. Like that helps, right? When they're like,
Yeah.
yes, I feel similarly. Like it's shenanigans, it's bullshit, whatever word they use, and you're like, oh, yes, like I'm not crazy. I feel justified. And then like enough time goes by and you're like, wait a minute. But they're in the rooms with the other people that
Right.
have more power and they're not fixing it. So like, should I even be in this room? Because like if we agree, it's actually almost worse in some ways.
Hmm.
Yeah, all of that to say, I think being transparent with the DM is difficult because it also affects how people see you as a leader, because that's the other part of this, right? If I'm, and this is not me being, diminutive to anyone or their position, but if I'm a shipment person at a clothing store or a barista and I'm complaining about like, this machine doesn't work, it's affecting my ability to do my job. If I'm a shipment person and I'm like, hey, we don't have enough racks so I can do my job, those complaints are seen as like, this person just wants to do their job better.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but most of the time, that's how it's seen, right? And then sometimes you try to fix the thing. But as a leader, when you start to complain about systems and operations, things that are not as clear cut as like buy new rack, fix machine,
Right.
that's when people are like, well, your job as a leader is to like make it work somehow. Um, so there's only a certain amount you can like be transparent before you're seen as like not a stable or secure or mature or professionally mature leader. Um, and when I was younger in my 20s, I definitely had that critique lobbed at me, which made me, tailor my voice to understand how it's going to be received. But even now, looking back on it, I'm kind of having a moment where I'm like, nah, 24-year-old Matt, he was actually right. Like, you were full of shit. Like, I may not
Mm-hmm.
have communicated correctly or like professionally, but like, I was not wrong. You just didn't want to have to address the thing.
So it sounds like there are definitely signs for before a store manager leaves, but you can't bring them up, um, and nobody asks about them. I'm curious, this sounds like a slow burn type
Mm.
thing. Do you think it's actually the uncertainty itself that is so painful after a period of time? So, like, you learn how the company works, you learn what you do like and what you don't like, and you're not sure if or when it will ever get better, or if you'll get asked to take on a different role, or if anything will change.
I'm going to use an analogy that I haven't used in a while, so I feel like I'm allowed now. It's been since somewhere mid season one. Sometimes being a retail manager feels like you're in a relationship with someone whose potential you see, uh, and they do change, but so slowly that it's almost not worth it. And then you
Mm-hmm.
reach a point where you're like, why am I in love with this person who isn't anything close to what I know they could be? And I can't be the reason they get there. I can't change another person, and in this case, a company. Like they have to
Mm-hmm.
want to change and faster than they're doing it. And at some point, it's the sunk cost fallacy. I think a lot of people stay because they're like, well, I've been here for 5 years and they promised us at that last store conference that they're going to work on the payroll model. And then, of course, that gets pushed out from their promised 12 months to now it's 18 months. And then by the time the new payroll model shows up, it's slightly better, but they've added 6 different operational tasks because maybe they've launched, I saw this a lot in the launching of like BOPIS and like omni-channel in general, ship from store, all of those things where payroll models were being like, oh, we're working on it. And then they were, and then it launched. And then they were like, but also now you have all these other things to do and they don't add to your payroll. So you're like, okay, so you just like screwed me, quite frankly, really slowly. Like, and not like, this is not how I want to, now I feel lied to. And so I think there's a lot of those like promises and they're always in the future. There's always like a distant thing. And you're just, and companies do such a good job for the most part. Wow, okay. I had a thought, now I'm going to have to go back to it. But companies for the most part do a great job of like selling you on them in the beginning, especially like in the onboarding, in the interviewing. And then I feel like it's like that first date, right? You meet someone and they're charming and they got the good job and whatever, they're funny. But then the whole relationship, you're trying to get them to live up to the first date version of them. Because that wasn't them. That was the character they played to get you interested. And I think that it's the same thing in companies a lot of times where you start out and like, even my friends have commented this for me when I'm in onboarding or my biggest flaw as a person maybe is that I believe the lie. Like I go into the onboarding and I'm like, I come home to my husband or to friends at dinner and I'm like, oh my God, no, this is the place. They've got this and they do this. And you know how that I hated that at that other brand that they did it. They solved that issue. They do it this way. Isn't that amazing? And then you get into your store and you slowly crack away at things and you're like, oh. And it's not that I thought that they were going to be flawless. It's just that you actually oversold things. And now I'm here in the role and now I'm waiting for you to live up to that. And for the most part, you don't. Which is why, and this was the aha I had where I paused, sometimes it's easier to go into a company that doesn't lie to you and just kind of, I don't want to say admits that no company is like, we're bad. But there are companies that are like, this job is hard and some people can't do it and it sucks kind of vibe. And sometimes those companies are easier to work for an extended period of time because you're like, they are very aware of their flaws and I see them and they have not promised me anything. So I'm going to make the best of this and just work within it and go forward because that uncertainty you were talking about, it's not that it doesn't exist, but there's no promises. There's no disparity between who they said they were and who they are, which is what I think creates a lot of the tension. And again, I'm an idiot for believing the lie. I mean, I feel that way frequently about myself where I'm like, okay, well, whose fault is this? Is this their fault for overselling? Or is it just my fault for being dumb enough to believe that a company this big or worth this much money was as good as they said they were?
You've run across a lot of the same problems across your roles in different companies and different sectors of the industry, right? Like similar. And the feedback we've gotten from this podcast is like store managers have a lot of overlapping similar problems, no matter the company, no matter the size of the store, etc. Do you think at some point, better, whether those get better or not, you're just ready for a different set of problems?
Yeah, no, I think that's, and I've said that, I think I've said this on a podcast episode, maybe. I've definitely said it in a LinkedIn post, and I'm going to say it again, and I really want you to clip this. This is a request. I do not arbitrarily seek novelty. Like I seek novelty as a person, but not arbitrarily. I'm pretty planful and mindful in how I do things. And I have been with my husband for 18 years. My best friend and I have been inseparable since high school, 23 years ago. Do the math. I'm not saying that as like a weird brag. I'm saying that because I do think that when people look at my resume, and I've heard this from directly from a regional, a DM here and there, almost that I have a loyalty problem, or like I just want something new, different problem. And I'm using those two relationships to just back up this idea, because it's like, well, that's not true. Like, as a human, that is not true about me. Like, but again, those relationships have like evolved and changed, and there's differences, and there's communication, and there's openness. And it's like, that is what I'm looking for in a business relationship, in a relationship with a brand. Like, I want to be able to have those open lines. And if I want something different or something, or a new set of problems, be able to communicate that. And maybe it's a store transfer, maybe it's mentoring, maybe it's something else. And those options aren't always available to you.
Could you go, so flipping the transparency thing on your DM, can your DM, or would your DM in your experience be transparent with you? What if you went to them and said, not complain, not even bring up a suggestion or give feedback on the system or process or tasks or anything like that, but ask them what they think about you, your potential, your future at the company?
I don't know that I've definitely never asked, I don't think. I think I just assume I know. It's a whole other, it's a whole other podcast episode, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because I think about employees who come to me who ask that same question. And I think it's a hard question to answer, again, when you don't have enough autonomy or control, because you also don't want to overpromise something that you can't actually help with or have any say in, right? So if an employee comes to me and they're like, do you think I could, and because we get this a lot in retail, right? Someone is going to school to be an accountant, a graphic designer, and they want to work in corporate. And they're asking, like, do you think I could? How would I? Or whatever. And it's like, you can give them your best advice, but if you don't have the actual, your hand on the lever of that thing, you don't want to be like, oh my God, you would be so, I've seen your work on Instagram. You'd be such a good, it so matches with the company's art, and you'd be such a good graphic designer for the brand. You don't want to do that, because even though all of that might be true, you don't want them to think that they have a future that maybe they don't have, or you don't know how all that works. And I think even for a DM, I mean, if you say, do you think I could be a DM? It's like, how many DM positions are really there in the world? And like, a lot of store leaders want to be a DM. And so they don't want to answer that question in a way that's going to make, like, almost give you a internal timeline, right? Because the second you tell someone, I think you can, or like, you just need to work on X, well, a go-getter is going to go work on X and then come back to you and be like, all right, like, now what? And so I think there's a lot of issues there, because in a lot of brands, DMs don't have levers that they can pull themselves to say, give a store manager a stretch assignment or new path to learn something. So they're like, so then it turns into the bureaucracy mess where they're like, well, you'd be great at operations, and maybe we can talk to the people, and then maybe you can be on a call and be the ops captain of the district, but that also, like, that's going to step on this person's toes. So, and then it turns into a whole thing. And then you're just left like, okay, cool, I guess I'll just continue the hustle then. Thanks for the feedback.
Listening to you talk, because you've given us a lot of examples about how you offer stretch assignments or keep people engaged. You get them to know them personally, what their personal or professional goals are, and try to make their current role relevant or give them a growth opportunity that will help them reach that so they're interested. You just mentioned stretch assignments. You said DMs typically don't have the levers to pull to give you that same kind of attention or direction.
I mean, it depends on the brand and what the brand's like structure is, really. I
Mm-hmm.
think in like a bigger company, it's much more possible just because there's so many things happening.
Yeah.
Um, but it also comes down to a uh, resources issue sometimes, right? Like, what if that stretch assignment? Because no one wants a stretch assignment. Well, okay, that's not true. Some people are gluttons for punishment, but like, if you give someone a stretch assignment, but it's also just like more work or taking some of your work and not really giving them what they need, or they're now working 50 hours instead of 40, like that's not truly good for development.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in order to, at certain companies, in order for someone to take the stretch assignment, maybe that pulls them off the floor out of their store for 8 hours a week. Well, where's that 8 hours a week coming from? Does the DM have a discretionary payroll budget? Some DMs do, some DMs don't. I think a lot of DMs do and they pretend they don't. Uh, and they're not willing to give it up for those things. Or they, maybe they don't want to give it up to certain people or they don't want to be unfair, whatever the case may be. It also becomes like a resource issue. And it's really funny that we're having this conversation because I also think, companies talk a lot about retention, obviously. It's like such a hot, like, this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So companies talk a lot about retention. They also talk though about development and succession planning and like having the next like person on the bench ready to go. But again, and I hate to make everything about like dating or friendship, but I think that there's like a societal thing here at play that's all not related, but it's like the same thing happening where it's like I think the same thing happens in interpersonal relationships where people are doing this thing in 2026. Like, there's a loneliness epidemic. Everyone's alone. Everyone wants friends. Everyone wants a partner. And yet, when you engage with people, and it's the same in companies, people are kind of looking at you like, where they're like, well, you go first. You be vulnerable first, or you invest first, and then I'll invest. But I'm not going to invest before you invest because
Right.
no. I don't want to be hurt or I don't want to ever. And I think the same thing is such a wild analogy, but it's in my brain the same thing. Companies are doing the same thing where they're like, well, we don't want to really invest in you unless we know you're going to stay. Or like, we don't really want to invest this time and energy unless we know you're really going to succeed at the thing. But it's like, you can't know because you're not, it's like you don't want to waste resources on someone who might not stay or who might not be good for that role, which is actually just making it so that people don't stay or they aren't good at that role. And then round and round we go. And then everyone posts their little things on LinkedIn that they're like, I've hacked the system. This is how you do it. But no one's actually doing it. People are saying that they figured it out, but no one's actually applying the lesson. Like
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown can give 8,000 speeches and Simon Sinek can give 8,000 speeches about vulnerability and teamwork and blah, 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 blah. But if no one's actually going into their workspace and actually changing their behavior and not store managers, because if you give me one more leadership book, I'm going to throw it back at you and make the VP or the regional read it. That's where change needs to happen. And then we're going to start to see the shift move. And I think one of the things that also is happening is companies are like, well, people just want more money or they want these things and that's not in the budget. So like, if you want more money, you can't, like, I guess you're going to go then. It's almost like this. It's the same thing with payroll, right? Well, that's just not a conversation we can have. So we're not going to have it. And I think it's a really nice way for companies to escape accountability. because the real change isn't actually money or payroll. It's just like these structural shifts and organizational changes and behavioral changes that would require change from them or the system, within a company as a whole. And they're like, well, we're just not going to do all that. So take it or leave it. And then people leave, and then they're like, why did people leave it? Well, that's the option you gave. Take it or leave it. They chose to leave it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so curious about these weeks, months, years, probably for some people where they're doing the job on paper. They're a solid employee, right? Your numbers are good. Nothing major, there's no major problems, but like suddenly you start to look elsewhere. Your eye starts to wander. And I'm just wondering how we can see those signals earlier and what opportunities there are to re-engage you. I mean, for lack of a more nuanced or precise term. And it's like we talk a lot about companies changing, right? Like systemic changes that, yes, would be slow, does not mean they're not worth talking about because they would be hard and slow. I think we will talk about them forever. But I also wonder for that person personally in that role right then, do they need the company to change to feel better, or can their situation in the company change to reignite interest?
I think that's different for every person. Uh, but I think there comes a point on the spectrum of disengagement where where the company could literally do a 180 and it would probably still be too late. Which is where I think, though, that companies sometimes land with the take it or leave it thing. They're like, well, you're not happy with anything. So we could have never done enough. So good riddance. Bye. You didn't appreciate what we had to offer here at ABC Corp. And it's like, but it's a pendulum and you let it swing way too far. The problem is that like in that first small swing in the beginning where changing and re-engaging is possible, most companies, most leaders are not aware enough that the pendulum has even moved, and they don't move fast enough with it, and they don't change enough for that person. They don't have to change the whole organization. That's not what I'm saying. Quick enough, because for me, and like people have written this on LinkedIn, but again, I've yet to see the change in organizations. But it's like, if I come home at the end of a day and that final straw was reached, whatever that straw may be, and it's not always predictable. So that I think that's a losing game. Companies can't be like, okay, what's the
Right.
final thing? Like you're never going to figure that out. It's different for everybody. It's different for every company. That's not the point. But what I'm saying is if I come home because that final straw has been reached and I sit down at this Mac and I start editing my resume, like my fingers are to the keyboard and I'm now putting my current role and what I've accomplished and whatever. If I've reached that point, it would take, and I think that's true for most people. Once someone starts editing the resume, I almost don't think they're retainable at that point. I think they've disengaged too much because now you're competing with a fantasy.
Right.
You're competing with the grass is greener mentality. And I know that. I'm smart enough to know when I'm sitting at a resume that I am also comparing my job to a fantasy. But there are so many horrid, poorly run, sad excuse for leadership organizations within retail, and we all know it, that the fantasy is fine because you're like, well, there'll always be another crappy retail company to come back to you know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're leaving, most people aren't leaving an organization that is well run and organized and consistent. And they can't be because, they're going quarter by quarter. So that's a whole other thing that we've talked about. But because of that, though, it's like you kind of, I mean, it's kind of like what we were talking about with the ego and pride thing. Like if you join a company in the upswing when they still got pride before they get ego, well, theoretically, and I've actually seen this on people's resumes, I clock it right away, where they've just jumped from that climb. And the second the organization hits ego, they jump to another growing company and they kind of like ride the same wave because it's really fun to be on that wave. I've been in organizations. That's when organizations are at their best. Um, and so it's like they ride the wave and then just keep jumping. And so if you're at the point where you're like, ooh, I could jump to the, oh, that's a growing company. Yeah, they're going to have a lot of problems because they're not going to know how, maybe their organizational systems or whatever aren't the best, but oh, they're on that wave. I'm going to, you know what, that would be better than the slump we're in where we already think we're too good and we're not willing to change. So yeah, I'm just going to jump to that. And then, yeah, true. In 9 months, when that other brand hits the point and you look at that person and you're like, wow, how unloyal. They're just jumping around. No, they just want to work somewhere that's like happy and fun and excited to change and they're in the change. And that's when companies are still receptive to feedback. Or when they're on the extreme downward side, because a lot of times too, they're like, any new ideas? Um, and so all of this to say that once someone sits down and starts editing their resume, I don't know, I think it's too late. You need to get the person when when there's an energy shift. And I think that's not something an organization as a whole can necessarily be attuned to. That's something that person's leader needs to figure out. Like, what is their baseline in general, and has it shifted? And I would argue that sometimes even overperformance can be a sign that someone's leaving. Like they're doing better than they've ever done. And you're like, oh, okay. Um, like all of a sudden they're a go-getter. And, I'm not saying that every time that happens, but sometimes that's people trying to hide their disengagement through overcompensation. So it's like, what is your employee's baseline and where have they gone now? And like, get curious about why, what's happening, what's the shift.
And do any channels exist for you to be able to communicate with any of your leaders about that happening? So, I know you have an annual or biannual engagement survey where you could choose to, write open comments or something like that. One-to-one meetings, team meetings, like how do any channels exist where you could tell the company or your leader that pendulum has swung so far that I'm getting a little bit disillusioned with this role? And do you feel like you have any kind of like responsibility to take agency of your own career and your own happiness to communicate that somehow?
I think my agency lies in leaving. That's where my agency lies. To
It
be
feels
really,
like the only choice you have.
yeah, I think a lot of times it does because you're like, okay, well, I keep being promised things or where they seem unwilling to change. So it's like, and you don't, and no one actually, well, with the exception of rare few, no one actually wants to be the complainer, right? No one wants to, every time they talk to their boss, be like, and another thing. Um, and so I think a lot of people, myself especially, get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm about to end another thing, my boss. And like, I don't want to do this today because then they're going to try to make me feel better or do the thing. And like, but again, they don't have the control. So they can't really do anything. So now we're just in this like back and forth that doesn't really make sense. So it's like I have some agency and I can be honest. In most roles, you can be a little bit honest, but you have to, again, you have to be careful about how you say it and what you say.
Yeah.
But I think leaving oftentimes does feel like the only actual choice you have
Yeah.
because you can never go back from, and I think this is kind of the issue, right? Like you can never come back from, or it feels like you can never come back from, I'm really unhappy and here are some of the things that would make it better or make me feel fulfilled or like the role. Because even if those things change or fix it, is like, is your boss now just going to always be like, is this, are you disengaged? Are you like, it feels like there's no coming back from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the reason I keep asking this question is you made a comment earlier on that was like, something about unless you're a company that's incredibly well run and organized or something. I've never seen that. And I've never talked to anyone who's told me, yeah, my company is really organized and just ahead of the curve and really well run and just it's all predictable and I don't know that that's a thing. And I'm not giving, all the issues that we've talked about retail having. I'm not saying it's a pass because I think retail is its own level
Mm-hmm.
of that for sure. But at some point, isn't the goal to have better problems? We're never going to have no problems.
Mm-hmm.
But our goal in life is to just basically have, better, I guess, problems. And I guess that's what I'm trying to circle around here is like, let's say things stay the way they are, or course correct wildly slowly, like Titanic course change. Is there something that we can do to keep great leaders in retail now while we fight the good fight? And it's fine if there's not.
I don't know. I think, again, I feel like this has been my answer for the last like 45 episodes at this point. I don't even know if we have that many episodes, but I feel like we've had like a lot of the answers of a lot of the problems have been the same, which for me comes down to like, can we just have the honest conversation? Like
Yeah.
that's all I really want. I think that's
Yeah.
all a lot of people want. And I, again, in small moments, I've seen retail do it. And it's weird to me that no one's learned the lesson yet. Because when companies, Old Navy did this once at a retail conference. I cannot remember what the issue was, if I'm honest. I don't think it was payroll, but it was like something where they were like, we screwed up. Like this was bad. And I just remember people being like, leaving the conference, and like all people remembered from that whole session was like, I can't believe they admitted. Like it almost solved the problem for a lot of people of like, wow, they just admitted that it's bad. Like that
Yeah.
this, and they're going to try to fix it. Okay. And I think a lot of what we're talking about now really does come down to, and again, I'm going to use the same example, but it's like, it's the same thing in a relationship, like, or a friendship, or any sort of interpersonal things. And I use this analogy a lot because I think all interpersonal things are the same. Like, we all bring our full selves to work, whether we want to or not. You think you're not bringing your past to work? Oh, you are. You know what I mean? That trauma because daddy didn't love you, it's coming into the office. You either are admitting it's coming into the office and you're aware of it, or you're not. And you're bringing it in subtle ways. And I think the same about all these interpersonal work relationships. But it's like in a relationship, it is much better when you can sit down with a person and be like, this is the problem we're having.
Yeah.
And even if the other person is like, I don't even know what to do about that because I've been this way for so long. This just might be how I am for now. And like, you can either stay with me in this journey that I'm in, or maybe you need to go because that's what's healthy for you. But this is how I'm going to be. That's so different than someone being like, here you go, coming with your fake problems again. Like, it's the same exact thing. Like, if companies were just like, we're so, like, give me the company that's like, we're actually just a bunch of flaws all together as one, trying to do our best. Give me that company. Oh my God. Like, I might never leave because that's like, because then also the pressure to be fake or to pretend is alleviated. And one of the things that I don't think I've said directly in this episode, but it's becoming clear to me now that I'm saying, like, about to say this, is a lot of that exhaustion about the same problems is the pretending, or the having to pretend that they don't exist, or that you're fine with them, or like you just want to be the good little retail soldier that doesn't talk about payroll again, or whatever the thing you're not supposed to talk about is. So you pretend. And that pretending, it doesn't matter whether we're in work or in life, becomes exhausting, which is also funny to me that we always talk about like, bring your authentic self to work. Well, my authentic self has a lot of problems with what we're doing, and I can't talk about it. So now you're asking me to perform like I'm in a bad Broadway show, playing retail store manager. Hi, welcome in. And cue dance number. And now I'm tired because I don't want to do this performance anymore. Maybe there's somewhere else I can do a different performance that's a little less exhausting.
Okay, final question. If the company, because again, I'm kind of just like exploring what the real frustration is, the heart, the underlying layer of this problem. So let's say a company admits and says, we know this is an ideal. We know. Let's say they say it every year, every quarter. Do you feel better? Do you feel better just being seen, even if it stays? Or does that have to come with either change or some kind of explanation for why it can't change, even if that explanation is we don't have time or we don't think it is an investment priority right now?
I think that works for a while. I mean, I don't think you
Buy
can do
some
it for
time.
quarters or years, but
Right.
I think you can do it for a while. I would say like even 18 months for the same problem, let's say. I think eventually people have to see some sort of even incremental movement in that thing for that to be okay. But then I also think, what if we just, I can't say that on this podcast. We'll have a whole other episode to do now. But I do think there is, because I don't want to give retailers an excuse, which is why I hesitated. Like, I do think there's a certain amount of like turnover that's like gonna happen, and we know that. We've just let it get to too much, and have to figure out a way to like rebalance the table a little bit. And so I think the honesty though is a big piece of it, because it feels like you're being gaslit in the worst way when you're like, oh, we have this problem, and then maybe they don't recognize it. But then also because some peers, for example, store managers who understand what's at stake and how they want to get ahead will also become a part of that, where they're like, it's really not that bad. Like, I know they cut payroll by like 20%, but like, did you see they invested in new like break room posters? And you're like, girl, why you be begging for scraps? Like, expect better for yourself. And I think that's where no one said it to me on LinkedIn yet. Feel free to come into my DMs. But it has happened in real life where peers, like I go to leave and they're like, you're not going to find anywhere better, or like this is as good as it gets, or whatever. And it's like, I don't think you get to determine that for me, quite frankly. And if I'll state this here now, if the rest of my life is me just jumping from retail store to retail store, and I work for every retail brand ever known to man, and I get to the end of my life, and all I know is like, I guess they were all bad, that will also bring me some level of peace, because I'll be like, okay, well, I guess this is just what it is.
Well, I actually think that's an interesting place to leave it. Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No.
Thanks as always, Matt.
Thank you.
You're listening to Dear Corporate, Love Stores.